Welcome to Perspectives in Mobile, the news podcast from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. Join us discussing the world of telecommunications, technology, and mobile innovations. From London, Dario Betty, MEF CEO.
Welcome to Perspective, a podcast from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum that talks about some of the key topics, some of the key parts of the ecosystem, but specifically how some of the people that are managing, dealing, creating some of the services and some of the big debates out there do look at these and how they came by to discover, to found, to challenge some of these markets. Well, today we got Mark Harvey, the CEO of Sekura, the mobile identity company, and a company that I most probably cannot pronounce because it was that my Welsh accent. Was it correct, Mark?
Dario, first of all, thank you for having me on the podcast today. It's great to, as always, spend some time with you. But look, I think the pronunciation is great. It's Sekura.id is what we go by. But your pronunciation was absolutely perfect.
Perfect. And thank you very much. Now, Mark, a long history in the market, I should say, a long history, a long knowledge of everything that has happened out there. Let me ask, with all things that are happening out there, why have you got so interested in identity and why mobile?
Look, I think that's, first of all, a great question and something that really, for me, the mobile phone has been something. I had one when I was kind of 17, 18. So many years ago when they first came out in the late 90s. And back then, that's when, making and receiving phone calls in the UK especially was extremely expensive, right? But I've always been one that has enjoyed that kind of cutting edge technology. I've been very fortunate to exit out of tech businesses in my career. But all of those tech businesses, Dario, have always been mobile kind of related one way or another. So that there's always been this kind of affiliation with mobile and mobile tech. Coming into kind of the mid around 2014, 2015, I was really kind of looking at then in my career of what's the really next big thing, right? Where's the next explosion going to happen? And when you looked around back then, so what was that, like 7-8 years ago, 9 years ago, everybody had one of these devices in their hand, right? It didn't matter where you went. Yep. It was with you constantly. So it was almost like a natural progression for me to try and understand where that market was going. And I was very, very fortunate. There was a consultancy position at the GSMA, which you all know very well, and to the listeners is basically the Mobile Global Association for the mobile operators. And they started a program that basically focused on identity. And it was based around the mobile operators becoming relevant, right? And I know that sounds quite a harsh comment, but if you think back then, and many years ago, that they were spending, hundreds of millions on buying spectrum and putting up towers and so on and so forth. But you had all of these OTT players, right, that were really starting to eat their lunch. So the GSMA formed the identity program to make the mobile operators relevant. And that's really where mobile identity first caught my attention. And I started to understand more and more of the relevance, how the mobile was intrinsic to identity. And actually, as much as a lot of young people don't necessarily want to remember their mobile number, but that was a unique number. And that's really where it kind of kicked off for me, Dario. And after, many years, 2019, Sekura was initially born. And as they say, the rest is history, but I'm sure we'll cover that in today's topic. But yeah, that's kind of how I learnt, if you like, and cut my teeth in the mobile sector, which was with my dear colleagues over at the GSMA.
That's great. It gives a very, very good, interesting look at, it was an opportunity for there, and it was simply how big mobile was always there, the great potential of having it. And then it was, tell us a bit more about Sekura.id and what you do right now. So what do you offer?
Sure. So I think what really sets us apart in the market is we are 100% focused on the mobile operator community from a data perspective. So we work very, very hard, and with the fabulous team that we've got here, we're talking to mobile operators all over the world every day. And if you think about the mobile operators in our world being split into 3 separate categories. So category number 1 is a mobile operator that understands mobile identity. They have a commercial and technical team embedded, and they have APIs readily available. Okay, so think here in the United Kingdom, that would be EE, O2, Vodafone, and 3 as operators, right? They're in our world in bucket number 1, so commercially ready for service. You then have bucket number 2, which are mobile operators that have an understanding of mobile identity. They know that it's really the next big thing, but they don't necessarily have the CapEx, they don't have the internal skill set, but they know they need to get into it, right? So they need that additional bit of support. And that's the first place that Sekura comes in. So our platform, we're able to offer a lot of help and support with the mobile operators to help them expose the data in a compliant way. So our platform's been built from the ground up, and our CTO, a gentleman by the name of Gautam Hazari, has wrote some amazing blogs and something you can find out on the internet and especially on our website. But so bucket number 2 is that category of they want to take that next step, but they don't necessarily know how. Category number 3 is mobile operators that don't really know anything about identity, right? They're just not ready whatsoever. They need that education to happen. So if you think of in our business, that's the south side, right? So it's the mobile operator side. So we've got those 3 buckets. We then have the northern side of our business, which is where via the platform we have some key partners around the world that then take our very, very simple API and we then expose that mobile operator data to them, again in a compliant way. So we're very, very strict in terms of compliance. We make sure that every single use case is signed off and signed off all the way through that ecosystem. So from an audit perspective, we can see who's using the data, how they're using the data, again, to make sure that it's been done in a compliant way. So in terms of service, it's mobile authentication is a key service. So think about an SMS OTP replacement, but in a seamless way. It's obviously a lot more involved in that, but that's very high level. I'm sure the listeners would have heard of services like SIM swap, call forward. There's signals like scam detect, which help with APP fraud. Basically, all of these signals, Dario, come from the core of the network. And that's basically what we package together in a very, very simplistic way and offer that out to enterprises via our partners.
Connect, if I remember correctly, the activity. But that doesn't seem to build a big consensus in the industry. So what did not work at the GSMA, if I may ask, and what should be working now at Sekura.id?
Look, again, I think that's a really key observation. If you think about, what the GSMA are, as you say, a very, very powerful force within the industry. They do so much amazing work for and on behalf of the mobile operator community. But ultimately, they're an association. And outside of Mobile World Congress, which, as you know, is an absolutely amazing event held in Barcelona every year, they're not really a commercialized body. And one of the challenges with what was then Mobile Connect, the GSMA, were taking this service, they were promoting the service across multiple countries. But if you think back to those buckets that I mentioned, bucket 1, 2, and 3 in terms of operator readiness, back then, a lot of the operators were really in bucket number 3. So they didn't have platforms, they didn't have departments. For them, it was kind of a little bit of an unknown. Also, what we find with the silent mobile verification product, and look, people call that many different things, passwordless auth, and so on and so forth. Because it's competing, or appears to be competing directly against SMS OTP, the mobile operators were scared of the cannibalization of that product. So there was big resistance when you started to get under the hood with certain MNOs back then. But I think what they've realized now, and this is where Sekura have come in, that if they don't start to play in this space, actually other authenticators are going to come in and eat their lunch anyway. So it's a case of let's join the party. They have signals that nobody else has access to. So again, if you think of a SIM swap signal or a call forward signal and these types of things, you can't buy that from a credit reference agency, right, or any other data supplier. It's purely the mobile operator that has that. And I think these are the key components of why what we're doing at Sekura to help this ecosystem and expose this data is so important. This data is only available from one source, and that's the MNO. So I think, it's to do with timing, and you see a lot of successful business people out there, and I'm sure they will admit it's okay having a good idea. And I think, the GSMA promoting mobile identity was a good idea. It was the timing around it, and maybe they didn't have enough luck at the time, right? So I think when you combine what we're doing at Sekura, we've now got the idea. We've tailored our platform to support the mobile operators in a different way, and the timing is now right. And that's why we're seeing more and more operators join our ecosystem. And I think today we're touching 76, 77 mobile operators, in excess of 2.6 billion people around the world are connected into the Sekura platform.
Well, timing is always important, and no surprise in that. So let's talk about some of the other timings, and I should probably start by saying we have seen how the last few years, an incredible growth in the OTP for SMS. Potentially, that growth we see forecast right now is challenged right now, and by players like you. So you could be the next big thing, I guess, in terms of authentication, taking away from what has now become a bit of the de facto monopoly on SMS on authentication. What other solutions are out there, may I ask, apart from SMS and mobile services, such as the APIs that you're talking about right now? What are you competing with?
So I could come at this, and I love this question. I could come at this and be super arrogant and say that there's nothing that competes, right? And from my heart,
we like
that's
that.
that's kind of the mantra within the business, because we firmly believe this is the right way to authenticate a customer in a secure and compliant way. But when you look at what we call the hyperscalers, so that's your Googles, Metas, Apples, Amazons, etc. Here we are, beginning of November. I think only a week ago, Amazon was in the press talking about passkeys, right? Yeah. And I think, to the audience, we think passkeys are great too, right? But they're great from a marketing perspective. They talk about passkeys being passwordless, right? However, if you think about, especially in an iOS journey, a passkey is tied to what, right? Your iCloud account. That's ultimately what it's tied back to. And how do you log into your iCloud account? It's a username and password. So what they've ultimately solved is using telecom speak, the last mile, right? They've solved that piece of, hey, use passkeys. It's passwordless. It's great. However, fraudsters, as we know, are very, very clever people, and behind the scenes, so it's almost as though they've got like a steel front door, right, in this last mile, but the first mile is a paper door, because it's still relying on that username and password. So if I've got access to your iCloud account, thanks very much. I've got access to your passkeys. So, again, from a marketing perspective to the outside world, when a big hyperscaler puts something out, people believe it, right? They don't think about researching. They don't think about trying to find the holes, and why should you? But it's when you start to look at, is it really secure? Is it really doing what it says on the tin? If there's a username and password that's sat behind it, then in our world, the answer is no. So look, that's one of the things. You've got Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator. There's lots of different authenticators out there, and I think some of them have a purpose. It depends on the use case. So as much as I would say, we call it safer auth. I would love to say, that there's nothing that competes and it's the best in the world and so on and so forth. And yes, in some use cases it might be. But in other use cases, it's maybe, too secure. It's not necessarily needed to that level. So I think, depending on the use case, Dario, is really, the important question really in that.
And let me turn around and turn our attention to other things you've done in the past. Because first of all, I think I can describe you as a serial entrepreneur. Right, you've started many businesses out there. This is not the first rodeo, is it, Mark? No. Tell us a bit of your experience. Mentioning only some of them, remittance and send cash. Why you're not working on remittance and you're working identity? What happened?
So look, remittance was something I kind of fell into. It was merely, meeting somebody that was looking at sending some money back home. A good friend of mine, he was looking at sending some money back to India. He was using, prior to that, one of the large, well-known organizations that does it. And I've got a curious mind, right? So I just thought to myself, well, if he's doing that, we know thousands of other people are doing it. He had issues with how he was doing it. It wasn't the simplest, but it was also quite costly. So it was merely an opportunity, right? I kind of looked at it, did some research in the market, and I was quite surprised at how much money there was to make in kind of, exchange rates and fees and all of these kind of things. So it was more of an opportunity at the time. I learned very quickly that it didn't excite me. Right, I think remittance is great, right? You take £1 and you convert it to €1, and somebody stood here in the UK, and within seconds, the person at the other end in Germany or wherever has received their euros. It's fascinating, and the tech is great, but that's it, right? It doesn't really do anything else. And for me, I think the space of mobile identity, we're at the not at the tipping point, but we're just on the edge. And there's so much more to explore where mobile identity is concerned. But yeah, send cash was fun. Learned a lot. Very, very small exit at the time. But it goes to show that a little bit of hard work and effort and research, anything is possible, right?
So let me try another topic of yours, because there are multiple there. What about working for an MVNO? What about the unlimited MVNO? What you've done there? Is there a life? I mean, there's always MVNOs are very big and there, but they are not necessarily one of the big successes recently. We've seen quite a few of them finding it in difficult times. What's the life of the MVNO? Is it something that excites you, or was also that?
So the MVNO down in South Africa was that was amazing, and I was very, very fortunate enough to work under the leadership and guidance of the gentleman called Ian Buchan, who I've got the utmost respect for. Absolutely inspirational guy, and actually shifted my life in the years that I was working down there for him. But the MVNO in South Africa, if you think about European MVNOs today, what people focus on is making it cheaper, offering more talk time, more access to data, these types of things, right? That seems to generally be what MVNOs do. And what we did there down in South Africa, we looked at the market in a slightly different way. And in a particular segment of the market down there, there's things like, and this may sound a bit bizarre to the listeners, but in the townships, everybody or a majority of people get paid weekly, normally on a Friday. And basically on that Friday, when they receive their money, the money doesn't last very long. But one of the first things they do with their money is they top up their mobile phone, right? So before going to the shop and buying bread and milk and what we would classify as very basic things, first thing they do is top up their mobile phone. The next bit of research we did, we said, well, what do they do after that, right? And we're then thinking they must go to the supermarket, but they don't. They actually then pay for their funeral policy, which to us seems bizarre, right?
Yeah.
But it's their burials, funerals are majestic things, right? Very different to how we look at them in Europe. So second thing they do with their money is they contribute towards their funeral policy. So again, putting our thinking caps on, we said, well, if we're buying wholesale access to the telcos and we're buying wholesale access to funeral policies, can we put the two together and make a product that sells? And basically, that MVNO still runs today, selling very similar products. But what that did was actually shift people's lives. And from Ian Buchan's perspective, and that's something, as I say, that stayed with me, even through today and everything I do. If you can create a product that helps shift people's lives, then you're going in the right direction. And that's what that product does, Darren. So MVNOs, yeah, excite me. Nobody would ever think that you would put telco minutes and a funeral policy together, but it's possible, right? You just got to understand your market.
And what a great thing, which is the world is so different. We probably talk about the same ingredients, but they still finds you lots of different complexity differences, idiosyncrasies. And here we go in South Africa. You have to pay for your funeral. Here we go.
Yeah. And look, I think, to that point, it's really important. And I'm sure there's, peers, other business leaders. Just because we're based here in the UK, you can't, if you want to be a global business, you've got to have a global lens. And because of something that works here, it doesn't mean that it's going to work in France or Germany or Spain or Italy or anywhere in Europe. And I think, when you go on to a different continent, be it the African continent, or North American, it's different. And I think in this mobile identity space, you've got to be so careful that you don't fall into the copy and paste mentality, and that you truly take the time to understand that local market and the use cases and how these types of solutions can be used, because it's different everywhere.
Great, and thank you for that. Now it's time for me to use this public podcast for a very personal consulting service. So Mark, tell me, you were successfully, you started and then you exited, you sold the web conferencing solution days. At MEF, we are still looking as one of the most exciting things happening out there of web conferencing, web solutions, multiple services. What has happened in this market? Where is it going? Do you still follow it? Because, what should we be using at MEF? Tell us more.
So look, I think the audio conferencing market is again absolutely amazing. When I cut my teeth, I worked with a company called Intercall, which in the very late 90s, and the incumbent in the UK at the time was British Telecom. And I believe, when you get to our age, Dario, you forget things, right? But I think at the time, British Telecom were charging something like 50 pence per person per minute, right, to access a telephone conference call. And it wasn't web, right? You literally had your mobile, or a lot of people then was, using desk phones, and you had like a long number to dial, then anything from a 6 to a 12 digit number followed by hash, and it was, it wasn't great. And then I think as things evolved, people started to move over to things like WebEx, which when it first came out was very clunky and not very user friendly. And really, the big game changer for me in the space was Zoom, right, when it came out. And yeah, I mean, it's still there today. It's huge. We use it in our company. You've also got Microsoft Teams as well. But I don't think anybody's still cracked it, right? I don't know about you, but I find every time we go on one of these, web things, right, to do an audio conference or video conference, whatever we want to call it today, you get people saying, oh, hold on a minute, I need to download this, or I need to download an update, or hold on, my microphone's not working. And when we were testing earlier, right, it was, can you hear me? Is my voice okay? Do I look okay?
I still don't know if we're recording these, Mark. I have no idea.
But and that's the thing. So I think there's still a huge opportunity in the market to make it simple. And this kind of, for me, wouldn't it be lovely that if you were a Teams user and somebody sent you a Zoom link, you could still access the platform through your Teams link, if that makes sense, right? Yeah, because that's the interface that you're used to using. So I think there's still disruption available in the space. But again, when you look at what they're doing, they're adding things like whiteboards and voice chat, and they're adding lots of other components rather than in my world. And if you think about what I said about Sekura, right, we are 100% focused on mobile operator data. A lot of these web conferencing platforms have kind of expanded to try and be everything to everybody, rather than focusing on the core. And to me, that's maybe where the opportunity is to disrupt them. But yeah, interesting space.
Interesting. I think time is up, almost up. So let me summarize it, just like for our title's sake. We look at perspectives, and today we've been very happy to have a perspective of Mark Harvey, the CEO of Sekura.id, in the market. So let me ask you to summarize, what's your perspective on what's happening today in identity and mobile, and also what's the future? What's going to happen out there? What's the market for authentication?
Wow. You've left a tough question to last, which is cool. So, look, I think in terms of summary of the market today, I think we're still really embryonic in the mobile identity space. Arguably, there's more and more operators that are joining the ecosystem. But there's and you'll probably know this number better than myself, Dario, but there's probably 740, 750, maybe even more MNOs, right, in the world today. And that number obviously changes on a regular basis. You've then got hundreds, if not thousands, of MVNOs. So when you look at the active ones today in this space, there's probably circa 100, right, maybe just over, that are in that first category. So in my world and my view and my team's view, mobile identity is still very embryonic. We've got a lot to do. I think where we've got to from even 18 months ago, we're transforming the space. More and more people are starting to understand the space. I think when you look at authentication, the hyperscalers, the Googles, all these guys, they're now talking about silent mobile auth and safer auth. So they realize actually moving away from their existing channels is really important. But again, they don't move overnight, right? There's lots of work to be done. They want a ubiquitous product. Today, SMS is ubiquitous. It's just everywhere. Whereas a lot of this mobile identity stuff is really in core markets. So again, lots to do there. I think we've got players that have come, they've tried, they failed, and that's a shame, because I think having players in the market is a good thing. A lot of people talk to me about competition and so on and so forth. We're never scared of the competition, and in fact, we're very close. There's all kinds of people. I'm not going to name them because that's giving them a lead that they don't need. But we talk as founders. We might be at an event, and of course, we don't fight in the corridors. We discuss what's going on in the ecosystem, right? We want to grow it. So I think that's a healthy thing. So look, as to where we are today, in a nutshell, still very embryonic, right? Where are we going? I think within 3 years, silent mobile authentication will be the mainstream authenticator. And what's going to pivot that is the hyperscalers moving to it. So they're not going to move all of their use cases overnight. Obviously, that's going to be probably year 3 to 5 that we'll see a majority of their use cases come across. But within the next 3 years, I think they will embrace this type of technology as it becomes more ubiquitous around the world. And I think the other attributes that we have, with SIM-swap, with call forward, we call it MPM, which is mobile to person matching. So a very similar product to KYC. I think more and more of these enterprises will start to embrace these products and realize that actually, somebody that's on a mobile device, we can keep them safe and secure, but in a compliant way. And that's basically the way the world's going.
Oh, great. Mark, thanks for this. Thanks for the last half an hour going through some of your experience, some of your views and opinions. It looks like we could do easily another half hour, if not a few hours more on that. But for today...
Always a pleasure, Dario. Thank you so much.
This is it. No, thank you. Thanks to Mark Harvey, the CEO of Sekura.id. And thank you, and stay with us on our next podcast. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Perspectives in Mobile. Join us next as we explore telecoms, technology, and mobile innovations. Stay tuned, stay connected, and let's unlock the mobile potential together.